thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this U.S. government research project, initiative, data set, what have you, and how we can better use it to answer some of the questions that this group has brought up over the course of this meeting, and to better understand Data2 in general. Before I go on, though, I do want to highlight that most of the research that I'm presenting was done by a summer student in our lab, Sayi Rizbud, who was absolutely phenomenal. So really, this is all her data. So some of you are probably wondering, what is the All of Us initiative? So this was announced by President Obama in the 2015 State of the Union. At that time, it was called the Precision Medicine Initiative, with the goal of advancing our ability to perform precision medicine. I can't think of a better condition than Data2 when we're thinking about targeting therapeutics. This is basically a resource that will collect a whole bunch of data on a whole bunch of people. The goal is for 1 million people. I'll show you some of the data that they're collecting. To date, they have recruited 700,000 people, so pretty big. One of the big goals of this study is to increase representation of underrepresented communities. So they're actually oversampling people from underrepresented demographics. And what's really, really cool about this project is that it's a very dynamic and growing resource. So patients, unlike with other big population studies, are very much engaged. They get surveys, you can recontact them. There's a lot of opportunity to actually get to know the people behind the data that you're analyzing as a researcher. So what do we have so far in this database? So to date, I said 700,000 people are enrolled. Not everybody has completed things. Data is very much still coming in. 431,000-ish people have filled out some sort of survey on their health, family history, things like that. A fair number have, given some sort of physical measurement, height, weight, what have you. 300,000 have linked their electronic medical record, which is huge. So we can actually get better phenotype information on things that the people might not think to fill out in a survey when they're participating for a research program. If you've ever worked with an electronic medical record, you know that they're not always the best. Sometimes things are missing, they may be biased towards billing, but it gives us a start at getting data for a lot of these people. Then a subset actually have Fitbits, so we can measure how people exercise, walk, things like that. What I get excited about as a genetic counselor is that 245,000 people have had whole genome sequencing in this data set. And that data is available now. You can go to All of Us and actually search through this data. This is much greater than Nomad. Even more have had genotyping arrays, and then a small subset have had long read sequencing. And we are continuing with this project to sequence and add data over time. So obviously, I had a lot of questions to ask this database when it comes to Data2 and what we can learn from it. First question being, how common is Data2 in the All of Us data set? And this is really, of course, building on the work from Dr. Lee, where he used Nomad to sort of estimate things like carrier frequency, prevalence, and what have you. So sure enough, getting into All of Us, we found quite a few variants. We found 25 known pathogenic variants, and there were 688 people who were carriers of these known pathogenic variants. But then there were 66 other VUSs, which we have yet to analyze. So I think the number of carriers that we have access to through this database will go up a lot, and we're in the process of sort of doing some functional assays and getting a better sense of pathogenicity for those variants. You can see on this graph, I've included the counts from All of Us and the counts from Nomad. So there are some variants where we have a lot more people in All of Us. There are some new variants in All of Us that were not previously represented in Nomad. So very interesting. What's even more exciting, though, is that through All of Us, you can actually connect people and see if a single person has 2 genetic variants or multiple genetic variants. So we identified 3 people in the All of Us database who have either homozygous or compound heterozygous variants in Data2. What this means, 245,000 people sequenced, 3 people with Data2. It's a much higher prevalence than our previous number. And that's not counting the VUSs, so it'll probably go up quite a bit. The other thing I should mention about these people who have, as we define Data2 in All of Us, they're all over 18, so this is a good look at adults. We know in rare diseases that we tend to capture the more severely affected people first. So we don't know a lot about these people just yet, but it is possible that they have milder or less severe disease and might be starting to represent some of the pre-symptomatic people that have been brought up at this meeting. They may have symptoms. All of us by no means, is only trying to recruit healthy individuals. Anybody can join all of us regardless of symptoms, so we'll have to really look into their data. So the next big question that I wanted to ask, and that it seems like a lot of you have wanted to ask, is do carriers of ADA2 have symptoms? And I think all of us is a really good, less biased mechanism for unraveling that. What we can do with all of us is very similar to doing a GWAS or a genome-wide association, where you take a group of people with a similar phenotype and you look for common genetic factors. And all of us, we can do the reverse. So we can do what we call a PheWAS or a phenome-wide association study, where we can take a bunch of people with a similar genetic variant and say, what symptoms are more common in these people than the healthy population. These data are still very, very new. It's still a very small subset, but so far we do not see any phenotypes that are strongly correlated with being a carrier of DATA2. So any symptoms over this line represent statistical significance. The only feature that comes above that line is a reduced, because the arrow is going down, dependence on psychoactive substances. Do with that what you will. There are a couple of other things in this sort of range of nominal significance that could have like whispers of DATA2, but it would really be a stretch. As I mentioned, we need more data to do this, and the medical records in all of us are still a little bit incomplete. So we will continue to rerun this as more EHR records get added in, as more people fill out surveys, as more people are added to the data set. We will also be trying to work with some other big databases like UK Biobank, going back to Nomad, to try to see if we can really, really suss out the carriers and get a good sense of the unbiased carrier population to make sure that we're not missing anything. Similarly, we're doing some work at the NIH to go back in our pedigrees and really evaluate the people that we know from our family members. But I think this is cool. All right, so this is the question that Dr. Kastner asks me every time we talk about this project, is why haven't we called these 3 people with DATA2? Those are 3 people who I don't think are on TNF inhibitors. So the answer to this question of if we can contact these people is no, for now. So as I said, all of us is very dynamic. They are very much building the plane while flying. The big goal was to get people sequenced, get this going, start recruiting, because it's lofty goals. So they are in the process of developing their genetic counseling resource. Learning about genetic information can be complicated. It can be psychologically burdensome. We need to make sure that people really understand the information that they're getting, especially at this level for this many people. So to date, a lot of people have received, all of us participants have received ancestry and trait results. Do you like cilantro? Is your earwax wet? Things that really are not burdensome, but they haven't really started doing big medical results. A pilot sample of about 40,000 people have received the ACMG secondary findings. So that list that I was mentioning, risks for things that are medically actionable. So risk for cancer, cardiac disease. I think everybody in this room would argue that DATA2 is very much medically actionable if you know that you have it. So we're pushing to get on this list, but we're not there yet. The other thing to bear in mind when we think about recontacting people in these databases is that the contact is based on what they consented to. So in order to get as many people engaged and participating in this database, really participation levels are in the hands of the people who are submitting their samples. So many people in the data set have said, yeah, tell me if you find something. I don't care if it's not very approved. There will be a mechanism for talking to those people. But there are a lot of people who have said, hey, you can have my sample. I don't want to know if you find anything. I want to keep living my life. I support research. So it is possible that we won't be able to get in touch with those people with DATA2, with the carriers if we want to ask them more questions. So something to bear in mind. So that's what I have for now. My email is up here because, like I said, this is very early days with this project. If you guys have questions you want to ask the data set, So you spent a lot of time learning how to use it, the programming that you need to sort of pull these things. So more than happy to run questions and kind of collaborate with people. With that, big thanks to everybody on the team, the All of Us program, the Data2 Foundation, Chip for every time we talk, saying, what are you doing with all of us? And of course to the patients who inspire us so, so much. So with that, I'm done.
All right, well, are there any questions or comments for Natalie? She's already preempted my question.
It's coming. Data2 will be at the top of the list when we can recontact those patients. We have many emails into them.
Ariane.
I had a question. Maybe I didn't understand the graph you showed, but one of them said abnormal CNS
I
imaging.
knew you were going to find that. I knew it. Yeah, we don't really know what that means. So that's one of the groups that we kind of want to dig in once we can actually see the medical records and see, like, does that mean they had an MRI once and they hit their head, or if it's, really something like a stroke. But still, that was in such a low level of significance that when I was talking to all of those people, they were like, ignore it.
So I just have a very quickie question. Clearly, Data2 is of concern and interest at this meeting, but you must have a wish list. How big is that wish list of things that really people should know about?
Oh, for the secondary findings list.
Yeah.
I was going to say, we've looked at a lot of autoinflammatory disorders and all of that
No,
stuff
but you
and a
must
lot.
have ones that you really, like this disease,
Yes.
really, the patients need to know.
Yes.
How many others do you have like that?
So many. One thing that I will say for
That's not a number, I'm just curious. Is it 100, is it 10, is it,
I mean, I think it's going to go upwards of several hundred.
Okay.
It is always a balance.
I would
of-
assume that, so
Yeah.
this is a real issue.
Yeah, it's a balance of what is helpful to patients, what, can they do things about, what can labs accurately report? I mean, telling labs that they need to report on 100 different genes is kind of a burden, and those genes and genetic changes have to be validated. We need to have the resources to talk to patients through those findings. There are not that many counselors who work on Data2, so, there is some work that needs to be done, but yeah, Data2 is definitely the top of the list for me.
Thanks for the good talk. I think that this is a great resource that we can start looking at. What Dr. Hirschfeld said was the size of the iceberg that we're not actually observing by doing this kind of genotype first scan. One thing I was wondering about for autosomal recessive diseases is how you actually establish compound heterozygosity and if you're actually able to phase data without parental samples.
Yeah.
And what kind of challenges you've addressed there.
Yeah, that is one thing that we haven't phased the data. It was people with homozygous or 2 variants, assuming that people don't have these variants in cis, but it is a really good question.
Do I have time for one more question?
Yeah, and they do need to be, these variants do need to be validated. What was that?
Do I have time for one more question?
Yeah.
No, your face said no, but you nodded. Okay. I'm also wondering about the problem of ascertainment bias and also missing data, and how, I think a null result for any autosomal recessive disease to say carriers, you don't have to worry, you don't have to anticipate getting symptoms, is a very important result. But I also think it's one that can be tremendously challenging to get from the electronic health record because you are not certain about what symptoms patients may be experiencing and just haven't been ascertained in their medical record. So do you have any thoughts about that?
It's a good question. It's a big question. And I think that's going to be kind of the big question for this whole database. It's sort of do you want really good quality data on a few people or okay data on a bunch of people? One of the things that we need to do is sort of compare to other studies and see, make sure that strokes are coming out for, if we have more people with Data2, but for other conditions, make sure that, big symptoms are coming out, because then we can trust the medical records a little bit more. But it's tricky.
Thank you.
All right, yes, yours.
So I guess it's difficult when a patient would say, well, I don't want to be contacted. But I'm sure there would also be a solution, like if you would become symptomatic, if you are at the ER,
Yeah.
you are in this project, then they could disclose actually
Yeah.
to the doctor what was found.
Yeah.
So that would help for the ADA2 deficient patients as well.
It really would.
We hope they don't choose that option, but at least it's better than not being contacted at any moment, right?
Yeah, and I don't know what all of us's mechanism is for that. It is very much a research study. It's not the same as getting a test through Invitae. The goal is not clinical care. Clinical care is a benefit of participating in the research. So,
Yeah, it's interesting, but because in the Dutch primary immune deficiency study, we also asked them consent to look at their whole genome. But if they don't want to hear if we have incidental findings that are actionable, then we are not allowed to do it, actually, because we don't want the clinical geneticist to sit on this information and not being able to communicate it.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
in that case, they cannot actually participate, and here they can. And,
Yeah.
and the problem lies with you. Yeah.
yep. Just to support research. And a lot of the recruiting is coming through sort of doctors' offices. Part of the oversampling of underrepresented communities is sort of trying to bolster that up at any cost, and sometimes the cost is they don't want to know about it. Yeah.
Hui.
This is more of a comment. I think fantastic presentation and very nice data. And I think gets to the point that when we did a prevalence study, we're a little worried that we're undercounting because there are a lot of hotspots not accounted for. I think that brings into a bigger problem where all of us is great. UK Biobank is great. We're going to learn a lot from those populations. But we have, I think, 3 out of 2 patients from Africa. Right? We're not going to have this database, right, for that population. And it's not because there's no data to there, right?
Yeah.
So I think as a community, we have to sort of figure out how we're going to do that, right? How do we screen those patients, and how do we help treat those patients?
Yeah, well, with all of us, certainly, with regard to the question of African Americans anyway, I mean, they are oversampling that population.